Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. It's Carolyn. Today I'm going to teach you all about boundaries. So you're going to learn how to set boundaries, what type of boundaries you should set in your life and how you can enforce them, how you can have a conversation with someone in your life about your boundaries, and also how you can respect someone else's boundaries. So this is really going to give you a breakdown on everything to do with boundaries so that you can start implementing them in your life and protecting yourself and your energy a bit better. So if you're new to the channel, I want to say welcome. Please subscribe. I would love to have you a part of this family, and turn on that bell notifications so you don't miss out when I post new videos like this. I post new videos every single week. I do more education videos like this to help you all with your spiritual journeys, but I also do fun videos where I react to different things. I also have a whole section where I teach you the different tarot card meanings by linking them to pop culture. So I take TV shows and movies and relate the tarot cards to people or scenes from those. And I also do readings here on the channel. So I do pick a pile readings and collective readings and past life readings, again, to help you all wherever you're at on your spiritual journeys. And if you want to help out the channel, definitely subscribe, share this video, give it a big thumbs up, and let me know in the comments down below what you thought about it. All feedback really helps my channel. So jumping into boundary setting, first we need to understand what a boundary is. So a boundary is a set limit on a subject. And so by setting this limit on a subject, you're able to understand what you are and aren't okay with, and then do what's best for you in the moment. So basically you're going to be defining your comfort zone and seeing what's in your comfort zone. And then you're going to see how far out of your comfort zone you're willing to expand. How far do you want to travel outside of what you're comfortable with? And by determining that, that's how you're going to determine what boundaries are best for you. And you want to set these boundaries for a couple of really important reasons. So the first is self-respect to yourself and to your own life. So one, this is giving you a better understanding of what your comfort zone is, what you are willing to do and what you're not willing to do. So you can avoid putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation that you're later going to regret. So you're showing yourself self-respect by monitoring and being aware of what you are comfortable with, and acknowledging that and respecting what you are doing to make yourself feel best. You're not pushing yourself out of your boundaries where you're feeling this anxiety-driven, reckless energy. A boundary is really meant for you to get a deeper understanding of yourself, know yourself better, but also treat yourself in a way where you're not constantly putting yourself into situations that are not good for you. And so by setting these boundaries and implementing them, you're also going to learn a lot of life skills that's going to be able to transfer with you into future relationships, into career opportunities, into a lot of different avenues of your life. You're learning these skills that allows you to be more confident, stand up for yourself, protect your own energy. You're also learning how to problem solve, how to address things, and how to communicate efficiently with other people, where you're not going in and causing an argument. You're standing up for yourself in a way that's clear and concise to another person. So you're learning a lot of good communication skills. And by doing this, you're also going to understand your compatibility with others, and you're going to learn who is going to be someone who's going to be beneficial to your life and who's not a right fit for you. And this can be, compatible when it's in actual romantic relationships. This can also be who's compatible on a friendship level, a career level, a networking level. You're going to have a better understanding and a mindfulness about what your goals are, what's in alignment for you and what you're working towards, and you're going to kind of evaluate the people in your life and see if they're matching that, and seeing if they're going to be helpful along this journey with you, or if they're going to constantly get in your way, tear you down, knock you off your path. And so because you're learning what your boundaries are and setting these boundaries in your life, you're going to have a better gauge on who's actually meant to be in your life and who's someone that you kind of need to cut out so that they don't hold you back, that they don't limit you. So it's going to make you have a better understanding right away of who's compatible and who's not. And so setting boundaries is something that's going to be extremely beneficial for you and for your life. But the key thing about setting boundaries is by learning to set the boundaries that are right for you. Everyone has different gauges on what they're comfortable with and what they're not. And so therefore someone's boundaries might not be the same for you. And so you really have to come up with your own set of boundaries that's going to actually be in alignment for yourself, for your life, and your goals. So for those of you who are really new to setting boundaries and you don't know how to even come up with boundaries, you never really evaluated stuff with yourself to see where your comfortability lies, what you first need to do is focus on what your end goal is. So first take a specific area of your life, and maybe if there's a certain person in mind that you know you need to set boundaries with but you don't know how, think about them and what you want your relationship to be with them. For those of you where you don't have a specific person in mind but you have a specific goal that you're trying to achieve, whether it's something small like you just want to read more and have more time for you to spend on reading, or it's a big goal and maybe you want to own your own company eventually. Whatever your goal is, no matter where it's at, focus on what you want that end result to be. And then evaluate the people in your life and see how they are helping you with that, or see how they have actually held you back from that. Are they someone where they're getting in your way, either by getting in your head, by making you not believe in yourself, or are they physically taking up your time, your energy, your money, your resources, whatever. See how the people in your life are actually affecting you, and if they're helping you or if they're hindering you. And so then once you have figured out what your goal is and you kind of evaluated the people in your life, I want you to take that goal and work backwards from it and see what it's going to take in order for you to achieve it. And then as you think of all of these things that you're going to have to do, really think about how this person has currently affected you, whether they're helping you or hindering you, and see if their energy is going to change, if there's going to be any potential problems, or if there's going to be any way that they're going to be beneficial to you and your life. And so by working backwards and understanding, what you want for your life, where you're headed, you're going to have a better understanding of, how this person is influencing you and what they're doing to you. And maybe if there's not a specific person in mind, thinking about everyone in your life as a whole and what overall boundaries you can set. You can also set boundaries with yourself. So when it comes to finding these boundaries for yourself, see if there's any discipline you have to do while working backwards on what changes to your own behavior you have to make. So then when it comes to figuring out what boundaries you need to set, you have to remember that your boundaries are only controlling your own actions. They're not going to control someone else's actions. You can't tell someone, hey, you can't do this. You can tell someone, hey, I don't like it when you do this to me. But you can't make them change the way that they live their lives. So that's something else to remember when setting boundaries. It has to be something that's centered back to you so that you are in the control to change it. And so when you work backwards, what you're basically going to do is focus on what your end result is. You're going to address the problem that's making you feel uncomfortable. And then you have to figure out the boundary you can do to make this situation more comfortable for you. So for example, if it's a boundary with yourself, let's say that you're not getting enough sleep. Your boundary with yourself is that you're going to go to bed every single night at a specific time. And it doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter who's calling. It doesn't matter who's texting you. You're not going to give an excuse to stay up later because your sleep is important to you. So the sleep and you wanting to gain more hours of sleep is going to be what's in your comfort zone. The issue, the block, is that it's not currently in your life. And so your boundary is that you are doing something to allow yourself to get more sleep. And you're not going to compromise what you want because of other circumstances that are outside of your control. You have the ability to control when you go to sleep. And so that's how we set boundaries. That's what you have to do. You have to look at the problem, see what you want, and see what you can do to make it happen regardless of the problem. Now, for setting boundaries when it comes to external people, let's say you have someone in your life who's extremely disrespectful, who makes you feel uncomfortable. Maybe you are a little bit self-conscious about your appearance, and this person always likes to put you down and make jokes about you. What you can do to set a boundary for them is first address the fact that you're uncomfortable by the way this person talks about you. So then you can set a boundary with them where you talk to them, you express to them how you are uncomfortable with how they talk about you, that it makes you feel insecure, that it doesn't make you feel good, and you would appreciate for them to stop making those jokes about you and either be mindful of your feelings when you're around them so that they leave you out of the joke, or if they can, just not make the jokes around you at all because you don't find them funny, you don't find them to be humorous. And so then what you need to do when you're setting a boundary for someone else like this, because again, you can't control someone externally on what they can do. You can go to them, you can ask them. But then if this person doesn't follow the boundaries, let's say they keep making these jokes around you, then you have to make an internal boundary that is going to be a consequence to them not respecting your boundary. And so I know this is getting a little bit convoluted, but what I mean is that let's say that this person is not going to respect your boundaries. They think they're stupid and they still want to make the jokes about you because they think it's funny and they don't care if they hurt your feelings. Then your own internal boundary has to be something along the lines of you not hanging out with them, or you starting to cut contact with them, you not being there in their times of need because you don't feel like they're a true friend. It has to be something that you're doing where you're showing this person that, hey, I can't control what you do, but if you aren't, compromising to what my boundary is, then I can't have you in my life because we're at this impasse and we're not going to agree. I can't change you, but you also can't change me to feel comfortable with this, so it's just better if we're not involved in each other's lives that much. And so that's how you have to break down setting boundaries. You have to figure out what the problem is, what your goal is, figure out what you can do to get the goal. But then when it has to do with someone else, you have to approach it first in a way where you're giving them the benefit of the doubt, where you're trying to, have them respect a boundary that would then be them taking on that task, taking on that responsibility. But if they don't, you still owe yourself the respect to enforce a boundary where you are not putting yourself back in that situation. So it's almost like you have to have a couple of different options for your boundaries when it comes to situations dealing with people outside of yourself. And so when it comes to making boundaries, they're not really that difficult. A lot of times it's figuring out what is going to solve the issue in your life that takes some time to think about and really come to terms with. A lot of times people are afraid to set these boundaries because they don't want to confront people. But really these boundaries, as long as you're doing them in a healthy way, they're really necessary, and a lot of people will choose to respect them. Not everyone will, but that's why you have your own internal boundary then, where that is then going to protect you. Because again, this all goes down to self-respect, and you're doing it to make yourself feel better and feel more confident in your own life to achieve what you want. So when it comes to setting these boundaries in your life with others, you want to communicate them efficiently, because not everyone is going to respect these boundaries and you can't force them to. But you're definitely not going to get them to be respectful if they feel like they're being attacked or if they feel like you're judging them in some way. So you have to be very mindful of your approach and your demeanor when communicating your boundaries with them. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you're not triggering their ego. And now this is going to be difficult if this boundary is coming from a place of frustration, or if this is coming from a situation in which there has been some conflict, some tension, because you're going to be in this state in which you are ready to defend yourself. And so you want to, protect yourself. But in doing so, that could trigger their ego. And so then they're not going to listen to anything that you're saying, because then they're going to be in defense mode, and this is just going to evolve into another fight between you. So when you approach them, you want to be very mindful of what you're saying, how you're acting, and what your demeanor is. So you want to approach it in a way in which you're not judging them, you're not yelling at them, you're not accusing them of anything. You want to approach this very calmly, very level-headed. And so what I would suggest when setting these boundaries is say, I would appreciate if you did this. Because this way you're not accusing them of anything. They're not going to feel as defensive. If you go into something and you're outright just saying, hey, when you do this, it makes me feel this way, and so you need to change it, they might all of a sudden go into defense mode and be like, I'm not trying to make you feel that way, and then start reinforcing what they're truly trying to do, and it's not going to be productive. Versus if you just say, I would appreciate you to do this, and it would make me feel like this. Focus on how that would make you feel more positive, because then it's kind of reinforcing a positive thing to something that they can do. And especially if this is someone who does care about you, they might not be intentionally trying to hurt you. And so instead of reminding them of something that they did wrong, remind them of what they can do to make everything better, to make the situation better. And for some of you, a way to not trigger their ego might be to actually go to them and say, I would appreciate if you did this, and in return, I'll do this. And have this kind of give and take with the boundaries that you're setting. Or maybe you can acknowledge some boundaries that you can do that would be beneficial to them, that you can be mindful of in your own life. And so if they respect this boundary of yours, you'll respect their boundary. And this way, it feels like you're going in to try and problem solve and figure out a solution, and it doesn't feel like you're going in trying to accuse them, it doesn't feel like you're going in trying to confront them, and it doesn't feel like they need to fight anymore or defend themselves. It's going to sound like you're trying to make peace with them, which is going to be extremely beneficial if this has been a tense situation. And even if the situation hasn't been tense, it's just better to try and not trigger someone's ego, so that this is actually productive, so that they actually listen to you, and then they can actually be respectful of you. If they're not listening to what you're saying, there's no way they can work on setting these boundaries, because they're not paying attention to that anymore. The focus has now shifted from being a productive conversation to kind of this argument between who's right, who's wrong, and it's just not going to lead to any winners. Now, for some of you, I know that this is not going to be easy, because some of your boundary is going to be no longer needing to tiptoe around someone's feelings, no longer holding back how you truly feel in regards to them, because some of you, your boundary might be that you hold in all your emotions at other people's expenses to make them feel better, or to let them get a free pass. And so you might just want to go confront this person and get everything out in the open. But this conversation where you're setting your boundaries is not the time to do that, because then they won't listen to anything you're saying. They're going to take it in one ear and it's going to go out the other. So if you want this conversation to be beneficial, you really have to use restraint. Afterwards, you can do whatever you want. Now, if you are at the point where your boundary is simply removing this person from your life, then you don't necessarily have to communicate these boundaries with them. That's something that you can just do. This is purely for the people where you're trying to keep this person in your life and you're just trying to communicate the boundaries to them. That's why you want this to be productive, because you need a way to work with them. Another really important thing is that you need to know what you're doing this for. Why are you setting this boundary? Because when and if this boundary is triggered later on, or if they're questioning you about it, you need to stand firm in what you believe in. You can't have a boundary that you're going back and forth with, because then the moment that you're facing opposition for that boundary, you're going to want to cave. You're going to want to change your mind, say, never mind, it's okay, and then just go back to the way that things were. But the thing is, the way things were before was making you uncomfortable. That's the reason for setting boundaries. So you don't want to do that. So you really need to think your boundaries through before you go and communicate them with someone. You have to understand why you're doing it. This way, if they ask questions, you can give examples for them. You can explain your logic and why you're doing this, how it's going to improve your life, and how in turn you hope it improves the relationship. But you need to understand it in order to give all those points. And especially if maybe this person isn't the one giving you opposition, but other neutral people in your life give you opposition, you have to have that why. This way, even if the person who you love most comes to you and wants you to change this boundary, you don't cave. Because this boundary and all your boundaries that you're going to set, their goal isn't to make others more comfortable with you. It's so that you feel comfortable with yourself and with your life. Now, this isn't saying like your boundary should be to go and be disrespectful to someone. This boundary that you're implementing with yourself really shouldn't be affecting someone in a negative way. If it's affecting them in a negative way and it's not like you misunderstood what type of boundary to set, that's not your job to then make them feel better about. That's for them in their own life to set a boundary so they feel better about the situation. So examples of this is that if you set a boundary where you have someone in your life who's just a user, who's just a taker, and so you set a boundary that you're no longer going to lend them money, or you're not bailing them out of problems. Yes, it's going to affect them, and yes, they might think it's negative, but you really don't owe anything to them. And because they're not giving you anything in return, why are you always there for them? So your boundary is that you're not going to help them when they need help anymore, because they don't do that for you. It's not a mutual thing here. And so this person might look at it and say, oh, you hurt me. But you understand that deep down, your why is that you're not hurting them. You're doing what they have always done to you. So if it's okay for them, it should be okay for you. Another example is if you are limiting your contact with someone in your life who makes you feel insecure, and you feel like they're not a good person to surround yourself with, and you only do it in times when you need to. And let's say you have a mutual friend who wants everyone to hang out every single week, and you know that's too much contact for you, and so you choose not to do so. They might feel like you're hurting them, but really you're not doing anything to hurt them. If they don't like the fact that you're all not hanging out together, that's for them to come to terms with and figure out why they're uncomfortable when it's not everyone together. While it might make them feel better to feel like everyone is close, it's not a good environment for you to be in. So you shouldn't have to compromise that for someone else, no matter how much you care about this third person. And so that's why your why matters, because you're going to list the reasons of why this person makes you uncomfortable, what you don't want to be around them by, and what they do to cause you to have to set this boundary in the first place. So you really need to understand your boundaries when they come to other people, so that when you're communicating them, you're fully secure with what you're doing. And this way there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. No one can sway your mind, change your mind, do anything to make you not enforce this boundary. And so this brings me to my next point when communicating your boundaries with someone. You need to take it very seriously. You need to have this level of confidence so that they believe what you're saying. They believe what your boundary is. Because you don't want someone to just think that you're saying all this stuff, but you're not going to enforce it. You need them to understand this is truly important to you, and that it's not a joke, that you're not just saying it to say it. You need them to actually understand that this is a situation that has been causing you stress, issue, anxiety, whatever it has been triggering for you. And you need to express that clearly to them, that they're able to understand it and not want to do that to you. And they want to improve your life and help improve the relationship. That's why you want to approach this in a level-headed way, but in a way that you're very concise and clear with what your points are, because by acting confident, that will make them understand that you're being very serious about it and that this isn't a game, it's not a joke. And part of this also means practicing what you say before you say it. When you go to communicate with this person, you're going to understand your why, but you're also going to be able to have practiced it before, where you now have an answer for anything they might say, anything that might be a response, you're able to bring back to your point and to the boundary that you're trying to set. And when you're trying to ignore their ego and you're trying to keep the conversation very calm and neutral, you're going to have the tools to do so because you have thought it through, you practiced it. This is not something you just want to go and wing, because especially when you're setting boundaries, this is something that's very important to you, and if you have a hard time confronting people, it's going to be difficult for you to remember everything off the top of your head. You might get very nervous during this because it's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of strength to set these boundaries and to communicate with the people in our lives. And so you really want to practice what you're going to say so that you go into it being fully prepared for everything. And this way, there's nothing this person can do, there's no way that they can react that's going to derail you and make you decide to no longer implement this boundary anymore. You have to go into communicating fully prepared for everything, for every reaction, everything they could do, everything that could get turned on you. And that's why it's very important to have this solid foundation and prep work and thoughtfulness before you communicate with them. So let's say you communicated your boundaries with someone and they end up crossing it anyway. What do you then do? The first step is to not ignore it, not brush it under the rug, not give them a free pass, not say it's not that big of a deal, it's a one-time thing. Because the thing when it comes to your boundaries, especially if this is someone who has a habit of disrespecting you, they're going to see how much they can get away with before they face the consequences. So if you told them like, hey, I'm setting this boundary, you communicated it to them, and then you don't enforce it in any way, that's teaching them it's not really a boundary, it's something you want, but they never have to give it to you. And so you have to act accordingly when they are disrespectful to your boundaries, when they do cross it. So allow yourself to acknowledge that it hurts you and that it's not okay, and then allow yourself to take a breath, to take a moment for yourself, to collect yourself, to collect your thoughts, especially if this is something that's public. You don't want to react emotionally. You don't want to end up causing more issues for yourself. So take a moment to collect yourself and assess the situation and see if this is truly like a one-time thing, like they just forgot, it's a genuine thing and they feel bad about it and it's not going to happen again. Or if this is something where it's showing this pattern of disrespect where they don't care about your boundaries and they're trying to purposely cross it, and see what you're going to do in response. Because that's when you're then going to be able to take the nuance into account and figure out what is truly best for you. And it's also important that you do something to try and make yourself feel better in this situation. So if it's something that happened publicly, maybe remove yourself from the situation. This way you are not there trying to deal with everything and wrap your head around it in front of everyone. If this is something that happens privately, maybe take some time to do something nice for yourself, or to hang out with people who actually care about you, who aren't being disrespectful. Try and do something for yourself to cheer you up, so that when you are thinking about what to do, it's not coming from this angry place. You don't want to project your own negative feelings into your boundaries, because boundaries need to come from a place of actually improving your life and having logic and reasoning to them. They can't just come from this emotional place, because then you're not going to be able to back it up with the whys. And so by taking some time for you to get into this better headspace, this more positive headspace, when you are addressing whether this is a one-time mistake or if this is a pattern, you're going to be able to be more objective to that, because your bias isn't going to be projecting the anger, the hurt, or the pain that you're feeling. And so you're going to actually be able to see, truly what is going on here. And so then once you figure out if this is a one-time thing or if this is a pattern, you need to then think about if more boundaries is going to help this situation or not. So if it's a one-time thing, it could be that this person, they made a mistake, but they caught it. They feel just as bad as you feel about it. And like you can see that they genuinely are not going to repeat this again. Well, then you don't necessarily need to set new boundaries, because this person understands it. They might just be taking some time to adjust, to remember this boundary, but they're putting an effort in. It seems like it's a one-time thing because this person genuinely feels bad and it's not going to happen again. So therefore, you don't need more boundaries, because this person already feels guilty about it. They're already going to take the effort and the opportunity to grow themselves and allow themselves to learn from this mistake. So therefore, you don't really need to do anything. It's something that kind of needs to be moved on from. Maybe discuss it, work it out with yourselves, but there's not a lot of change that needs to be done here. It just needs more time and more growth for this person to not make this mistake again. Now, let's say that this person, they did make a mistake. It's a one-time thing, but let's say they don't fully understand it. They're still not understanding your boundaries or what they're there for. Then maybe you do need to add a little bit more boundaries or be a little bit more strict with your boundaries, where maybe you talk to this person again, or if you're not comfortable talking with them, maybe you actually don't hang out with them for a period of time until they learn to be more respectful and not make that mistake in front of you again. And so you're setting these stricter boundaries with them, but it's for a limited time. It's not permanent. It's just kind of teaching them like, hey, this hurt me. I'm acknowledging that it hurt me and that's the consequence, but I'm going to move on along with you as long as you continue not to make that mistake again. And you're actually showing this pattern of growth and not this pattern of repetition. Now, if it's a situation in which this person is just purposely pushing your boundaries because they want to see what they can get away with, then you need to address, okay, is this something that more boundaries is going to help, or are they going to continue to just push those boundaries more and more and just try and get away with everything? Because if it's something where someone is trying to push you and no set of boundaries is going to help you with them, and they're never going to learn, they're never going to be respectful, it might be something where there needs to be a harsher consequence, such as you cutting them out of your life. And that might be the only thing you can do with the way this person acts and treats you. And so that's where you really have to evaluate, one, what the reasoning for breaking this boundary was. Was it purely an accident, or was there malice involved? And then you have to figure out, what boundaries will help, what boundaries won't help, and what you truly need to do in this situation to make it better for you so that you avoid this situation reoccurring in the future. And so once you have that all figured out, then you're making your plan for your next step, what you're going to do next, whether that's learning what new boundaries you need to set, whether that's moving on or cutting this person out. You have to then take it into your control on what to do next in order to provide an adequate consequence for what this person has done and what boundary they have crossed. And so this situation is going to require a lot of nuance based on what has went on in your life and your interactions with this person. So now you've learned what a boundary is, how to communicate your boundaries with others, how to set boundaries for yourself, and what to do when people cross your boundaries. So now what do you do when someone else is trying to implement a boundary with you? How can you respect their boundaries and your boundaries at the same time? So when it comes to someone else setting a boundary with you, the first thing you have to remember is that they want their boundary to be respected as much as you want your boundary to be respected. So just because you might not agree with their boundary doesn't mean you get to just bulldoze over it because you don't agree with it. The same way you wouldn't want someone else doing that for you. You have to be mindful of why they're setting their boundary. And so you don't necessarily have to agree with their boundary, but you do have to respect it if this is someone you want in your life. And so take a moment to put yourself into their shoes and see it from their perspective, and maybe you can get a better understanding of why they needed to set this boundary with you in the first place by doing this, by allowing yourself to see it from their perspective. And because you don't want your own ego to get defensive with them either. And I know it's difficult when our emotions are involved. So definitely be a little bit mindful with this and be very thoughtful and considerate of how you would feel if you were them. And so even if it's not an ideal situation, if this is going to make this person feel more comfortable and make your relationship better, try your best to just respect it. Try to understand it as best as you can and just be mindful of it and don't cross those boundaries with them. And now if you do cross that boundary with them, try your best to acknowledge it right away and apologize for it, own up to it. Don't try and defend yourself for why you did it, or don't try and tell them that you think their boundary is stupid. Allow yourself to be respectful, be mindful of it, and again, go back to the way you want others to treat you and your own boundaries. You don't want someone trying to negate your boundaries just because they don't believe in it, because a lot of the times when it comes to boundaries, if someone doesn't like your boundaries, it's because they benefited from you not having those boundaries. And so if you really dislike someone's boundaries, think to yourself why that truly is. What about their boundary is really hurting you to the point where you need to be so blatant about disrespecting it? because you don't always have to agree. You're not always going to agree with everyone in the way that they live their lives, but there's a way to, not agree but still do it, versus a way to disagree and be very vocal about that. It's not really up to you what this person does or doesn't do with their life. And remember that when someone is setting a boundary with you, that means that they still want this relationship to work. They're not doing it because they hate you. They're not doing it to hurt you. They're doing it because they don't want this relationship to become dysfunctional. And so they're doing what they can to improve the relationship before it gets to the point of no repair. And so remember that if someone's setting a boundary and you don't necessarily love it, the boundary can always be a lot harsher. This could be someone that's no longer in your life because of your own actions. And so you want to be very mindful of that while you might not agree, while that might not be your intention, obviously you have done something to this person where they felt they needed to set boundaries with you. And therefore you also need to do your part to acknowledge things and work on the relationship. Eventually, if you do your part, you might get to a point where the boundary doesn't need to be there anymore. It doesn't need to exist. But at the point when someone's communicating this boundary with you, it does. And so you have to be very conscious of the fact that at least they're trying, at least they're putting in an effort to make this relationship succeed. And then with that being said, let's say that you have actually thought about this boundary and you feel like there's some sort of compromise. Make sure that has been something that you genuinely have thought for a long time about, that makes a lot of logical sense, that's very mindful of where they're at, and you have put yourself into their shoes to think about how they're going to react to it, and make sure that it's actually worth suggesting before you do so. And make sure that when you are saying this, there is this level of compromise of you also taking accountability for things. You can't just go to someone and say, hey, you told me this boundary, but I don't like it, so I think you should do this instead. That's not going to go over well. And this is then going to make you trigger their ego, and it's going to lead into more conflict, more tension between you two. If you really have like this great idea of a compromise for this boundary that you think is going to improve this boundary in your relationship, go for it. But it has to be something that you have actually put a lot of thought and consideration into in order for the energy to actually be accepting and receptive of it. And then the last thing for you to be very mindful of when listening to someone else's boundaries and actually accepting them is being honest with yourself. And if this is something that you can't accept, it's not something that you can do, you have to accept the consequences of that. And so if this person's setting this boundary to improve your relationship and you're not willing to put in the work to improve the relationship, you kind of need to accept that the relationship's going to fall apart, that you're not going to have a relationship with them, that you're not going to be in their life. You can't have it both ways. You can't want to continue to be in someone's life and be disrespectful to them and not respect their boundaries. And so if that's surely something that's not in your power to do, that's okay. Not everyone can do what everyone expects of them and wants of them. But then you are going to face the consequences of that boundary. And maybe it's not going to be as severe as them actually cutting you out, but the relationship itself won't be what it fully once was. It will be damaged on some level, whether that is less communication, less contact, whether that is not doing the things you once did. And that's okay if you're okay with that happening as well. But just be fully prepared for the consequences if you can't accept the responsibility of respecting the boundaries. But it's better to be upfront about the fact that you can't respect their boundaries rather than tell them that you can do it and really never plan on doing it or not being able to live up to those expectations. And so while it might hurt you to admit that and say, you know what, I can't do it, it's going to be better for you to do that instead of stringing them along and pretending like you can do it and then actually hurting them more. And it's also better for you to accept accountability instead of further damaging the relationship, because maybe this way the relationship can be a little bit more mature and things can be a bit more amicable than they would be if you continue to say, oh, I can do something when you really never intend to, or you're really not capable on doing so. And so I hope that overall you found this video very useful and helpful for setting your own boundaries, what steps to take in order to do so, and how to listen to other people when they set boundaries for you. I really hope you found this video educational and that helps you all along with wherever you're at in life. If you found this video to be helpful, definitely give this video a big thumbs up and share with others who need to hear it. Also subscribe. I would love to have you a part of this family, and make sure you turn on that bell notification so you don't miss out when I post my next video. I'm going to have other videos of mine linked in the cards above for you to watch next, and I can't wait to see you all in my next video. I hope you have a good one. Bye!